I never pictured my graduation day starting with silence. In my mind, I always imagined my mother standing in the kitchen doorway, already dressed, already proud, maybe even crying a little. My father adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror, grumbling about parking near the university auditorium. My younger sister Vanessa leaning against the counter, scrolling her phone but secretly excited, the way she always pretended not to care about things that actually mattered to her. Instead, the first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes that morning was how still the house was. Not the kind of still that happens when people are sleeping. The kind that tells you, before you even check, that something is wrong. I got up the way I always do, early out of habit from years of pre-dawn hospital rounds. I was 3 weeks away from completing my residency in emergency medicine, and my body had been trained to wake before the sun regardless of what the calendar said. The house we shared in Philadelphia felt strange that morning. Too clean, too quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight. I walked down the hall in my socks, listening. No coffee maker, no television in my parents' room, no sound of my sister's music bleeding through the wall the way it usually did. The kitchen was empty. Spotless in a way it never was on ordinary mornings. Not a single cup out, not a dish in the sink. Just the tile countertops reflecting the gray early light, and in the middle of the kitchen island, a single envelope with my name written on it in my sister's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. Vanessa had always written my name the same way, with a looping capital D that she'd developed back in middle school. I'd seen that handwriting on birthday cards and grocery lists, and, once, on a form she filled out pretending to be me to get out of a school trip she didn't want to attend. I stood there for a moment just looking at it. Then I opened it. The note inside was 4 sentences long. We decided to take a family trip to Cancun. You're always so busy with your doctor stuff anyway. Good luck at your little ceremony. Don't wait up. I read it twice. Then I set it down on the counter and stood very still. My graduation from medical residency was not a small thing. It had taken 11 years of relentless work after high school, 4 years of undergrad with a double major, 4 years of medical school, 3 years of residency that had pushed me to the edge of what I thought I was capable of more times than I could count. There had been nights when I sat in the hospital parking garage at 2 a.m. and cried in my car before going back inside. There had been moments when I nearly quit, when the exhaustion was so complete that my whole sense of self dissolved into the next task, the next patient, the next chart to sign. I had told my family about this date for over a year. I had mentioned it at Thanksgiving. I had texted reminders. My mother had RSVP'd to the university for 2 guests. She had RSVP'd, and now the house was empty, and there was a note on the counter about Cancun. I walked to the window above the sink and looked out at the driveway. My father's car was gone. My sister's second-hand sedan was gone. The driveway held nothing but the shadow of the oak tree that had been there since before we moved in. I thought about calling. My thumb hovered over my mother's name in my contacts for a long moment. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and went to make coffee. The thing about 11 years of medical training is that it conditions you not to fall apart when things go wrong. You learn to move through shock. You learn to compartmentalize. In the emergency department, I had seen things that would break most people, and I had learned to feel them fully and still keep moving. I applied that now. I let the hurt settle into me exactly as it was, and then I told myself I still had things to do. My gown was hanging on the back of my bedroom door. My hood was folded neatly in the garment bag beside it. I had ironed both the night before while my family watched television in the other room, and no one had come to check on me or ask if I needed help. That detail landed differently now. I stood in the kitchen waiting for the coffee and thought about the years. Not bitterly, just clearly, the way you look at something in better light and finally see what it actually is. My sister Vanessa had always been the one my parents organized themselves around. When Vanessa got into trouble, there were family meetings. When Vanessa failed her classes, there were tutors funded with money I had contributed to the household while working part-time through college. When Vanessa decided she wanted to move to New York to pursue modeling and it didn't work out and she came home with debt, my parents absorbed it without question and told me I should be more understanding because she was sensitive. I was never sensitive, apparently. I was the capable one, the one who would be fine. The coffee finished brewing and I poured a cup and sat at the kitchen table where I had sat for 28 years of my life. The graduation program was on the table, the one the university had mailed weeks earlier. My name was in it. Dr. Diana Mercer. I had read it probably a dozen times, each time feeling something in my chest loosen slightly, the long-held tension of someone who has been working toward a single point for longer than they can fully remember. I picked up the envelope again and reread the 4 sentences. Don't wait up. That was the part that stayed with me, as if I were the child waiting for a parent to come home. As if my entire graduation was an inconvenience they were politely tolerating by choosing not to attend. My phone buzzed. I turned it over and saw a text from my closest friend, Priya, who had been my study partner through medical school and was now finishing her own fellowship in cardiology 2 states away. She had taken the train up specifically to be here today. I'm at the hotel. What time do you want me at yours? Also, please tell me you've eaten something. I smiled despite everything. I typed back, come whenever. I'll explain when you get here. Priya arrived 40 minutes later in a bright yellow wrap dress with a tote bag full of food she had brought from a bakery near her hotel. She took one look at the empty house, set the bag on the counter and said, "Where is everyone?" I handed her the note. She read it once and set it down with the particular precision of someone choosing not to throw something across a room. Cancún, she said. Cancún, I confirmed. She opened her tote bag, took out 2 croissants and a container of fruit, and set them in front of me with the focused efficiency of a woman who had gotten through medical school, partly by feeding people when they were struggling. Eat, she said, and then you are going to put that gown on and we are going to go, and you are going to walk across that stage, and it is going to be exactly what it should be. There might not be anyone from my family in the audience, I said. Then I'll cheer loud enough for 10 people, she said. I've been practicing. I looked at her for a long moment. There was something clarifying about being seen by someone who didn't need you to perform okayness. Priya had watched me get through things that would have broken other people, and she had never once suggested I wasn't allowed to feel them. I actually thought they might not come, I said quietly. I think part of me knew. She nodded slowly. I know you did. That's the part that's hard. It's not even surprise. It's just confirmation. She sat across from me and didn't rush to fill the space with reassurance, which was exactly right. You built something real, she said finally. That's what today is. What they do with it is their decision, but what you built doesn't change. I picked up the croissant. We sat in the kitchen of my childhood home, the one my parents were not in, and we ate breakfast in the morning light, and I let the hurt be what it was without trying to make it smaller than it was. Then I got up, went to my room, and put on my gown. The university auditorium held about 1,200 people, and by the time Priya and I arrived, nearly every seat was full. The air smelled like floor wax and floral arrangements, and the particular charged energy of people who have been waiting for something for a long time. Families clustered in the rows, adjusting lanyards on cameras, saving seats with programs, calling to each other across the aisles. I scanned the rows out of habit and then stopped myself. The graduating residents were directed to a staging area behind the main hall, where we were sorted alphabetically and given instructions about crossing the stage. I found my place in line between 2 colleagues I'd worked alongside for 3 years, both of them buzzing with the specific nervous energy of people who had survived something difficult and were finally being allowed to acknowledge it. My whole family drove in from Ohio, said Marcus, who was standing just ahead of me. He was a 3rd-year emergency medicine resident like me, lanky and quietly competent, the kind of doctor who remembered every patient's name. Mom cried on the phone for about 20 minutes when I told her the date. That's a good kind of crying, I said. He grinned. Yeah, the best kind. I didn't say anything else. I adjusted the hood on my gown and looked down at my hands, which were steady. 11 years of steadying myself in much harder rooms than this one. The ceremony began with the kind of processional music that makes the moment feel formally real in a way that nothing else quite does. We filed in to scattered applause that built as we walked, and I kept my eyes forward and my chin level the way I'd learned to do in moments that required me to hold myself together without showing the seams. The dean spoke about the class, about the years, about the particular weight of what it means to carry someone's health in your hands. I had heard versions of this speech before, but today it landed differently. I thought about the nights in the parking garage. I thought about the patient I'd lost in my first year, the one I'd replayed 1,000 times. I thought about the morning I got my board scores and sat alone in my apartment and didn't have anyone to call who would fully understand what those numbers meant. I thought about the note on the kitchen counter, your little ceremony. When they called my name, I walked across the stage. The applause was general, the kind given to every name, But somewhere in the middle of it, I heard Priya's voice cut through clearly, sharp and unambiguous, cheering the way she had promised. I shook the dean's hand. I accepted my certificate. I stood at the edge of the stage for just a moment and looked out at the auditorium, not looking for anyone specific, just looking. It was enough. It was more than enough. What happened next I didn't plan for. The university had a policy of inviting a small media team to document graduation ceremonies, partly for the university's own archives and partly because a regional news outlet had an ongoing partnership with the medical school that went back several years. There was a camera crew near the back of the auditorium. I had noticed them during the processional but not thought much of it. After the ceremony, during the reception in the atrium outside, a woman with a press badge approached me and Priya. She introduced herself as a reporter from the Philadelphia regional affiliate and explained that their segment that year was focused on first-generation physicians and non-traditional paths into medicine. Someone on faculty suggested your name, she said. Would you be willing to do a quick on-camera interview? Just a few minutes about your path through residency. I looked at Priya, who gave me a look that said, obviously yes. The interview was brief, maybe 8 minutes. The reporter asked about my background, about why emergency medicine, about what I would tell younger students who were thinking about pursuing medicine but felt the path was impossible. I answered honestly. I talked about the years of early mornings and late nights. I talked about learning to hold other people's fear without losing your own footing. And when she asked if there was a moment that made it all feel worth it, I said, today, honestly, just today. Is your family here to celebrate? She asked. I paused for just a second. I have the people who matter most to me here, I said. That's what I'm focused on. It was a clean answer. Not a lie. Not a wound held up to a camera. Just the precise truth. The segment aired that evening on the local news. I didn't know it aired that evening because I was at dinner with Priya and 2 other colleagues at a restaurant she had picked, somewhere with good lighting and better food, and I had left my phone in my bag for most of the meal on purpose. When I finally checked it around 9 o'clock, waiting for Priya to come back from the restroom, I saw that the screen was so full of notifications it took several seconds to process what I was looking at. 47 missed calls. I stared at the number. The calls were from my mother, my father, and Vanessa, stacked in layers going back to approximately 7:15 in the evening. The voicemails had filled to the limit. The texts were a wall of names repeating. I set the phone face down on the table and sat back. Priya returned and read my expression immediately. What happened? I think they saw the news segment. She sat down slowly. How many calls? 47. She picked up her wine glass and said nothing for a moment. Then, what do you want to do? I thought about it. I thought about the note on the kitchen counter. The looping D in my name. The 4 sentences that had managed to reduce 11 years to your little ceremony. Nothing tonight, I said. I put the phone back in my bag. The voicemails, when I listened to them the next morning, were exactly what I had expected and nothing I was prepared for at the same time. My mother's first message was sharp and breathless. She said she had seen the interview and that I had made them look terrible. She said she hoped I was happy with myself. She said that family doesn't just stop being family because things got complicated. My father's was shorter. He said they had a right to an explanation. He said we needed to talk. Vanessa's messages were the hardest to listen to, not because they were more hurtful than my mother's, but because they cycled through 3 different registers in the span of 6 messages. The first 2 were defensive and cutting, the way she always got when she felt cornered. The third was quieter, something closer to confused. The 4th was angry again. The 5th was the one I had to stop and replay. I know I've done things, she said in the 5th message. Her voice was uneven. I know I'm not always fair to you, but you're my sister. You can't just let them put you on television and act like we don't exist. I sat with that for a long time. She wasn't wrong that it hurt. She wasn't wrong that something had broken, or maybe that something had finally been acknowledged that had been broken for a while. But what struck me most was the framing. Not I'm sorry we missed your graduation. Not I should have been there. The hurt she was naming was about how the situation reflected on them, not what they had done to create it. The 6th message was silence for about 4 seconds and then a hang-up. I did not call back. I also did not call back the following day, or the day after that. The calls continued coming in shorter bursts. My mother tried twice more. My father tried once. Vanessa sent 3 texts over the next week that ranged from accusatory to something almost like pleading. I read them. I did not respond. I want to be honest about what that silence cost me, because it would be easier to say it felt clean and simple. It didn't, not entirely. There were nights in the first month when I would pick up my phone and scroll to my mother's name and feel the old pull, the one that had been conditioned into me over decades. The pull toward managing her feelings. The pull toward explaining myself. The pull toward performing enough okayness that she could feel absolved. I put the phone down every time. What helped was staying in motion. I had accepted a position as an attending physician at Jefferson Medical Center, starting 6 weeks after graduation. The role was exactly what I had worked toward: a full-time emergency medicine attending with responsibilities I was ready for and a team that was, from the first day, genuinely welcoming. I arrived early and stayed late, not from anxiety, but from engagement. The particular aliveness that comes from doing work that is difficult and meaningful and yours. Priya came to visit the month after graduation, and we cooked dinner at my apartment, the one I had moved into 3 years earlier and slowly made into something that felt like mine. She brought wine, and we sat at my kitchen table, and I told her about the voicemails. "Are you going to respond eventually?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I'm not trying to punish them. I'm just not sure what there is to say." She turned her wine glass slowly. "You don't have to have a reason," she said. "You're allowed to, just not." That landed somewhere important. One of my colleagues at Jefferson, a senior attending named Dr. Okafor, who had been practicing emergency medicine for almost 20 years, found out about the news segment a few months in when it came up in conversation. He had seen it when it aired, it turned out, and remembered it. "I watched that interview," he said one afternoon when we were both charting between patients. "I thought, whoever that is, she's going to be good at this. There's something in the way she talks about it." "I was mostly just trying to answer the questions," I said. He smiled. "That's how you know you mean it." It was a small thing, but I thought about it for days afterward. The hospital had a mentorship program for pre-med students from underprivileged backgrounds, a pipeline initiative that connected working physicians with students who were trying to find their way into medicine without the usual advantages of money or connections or family members who had done it before. I signed up to mentor 2 students in my first year, then 4. Then I found myself running a monthly session that expanded until it had a waiting list. I named it the Meridian Program, after a line from something I had read in medical school about how true north isn't always where people tell you it is. You have to find it yourself. The students who came were remarkable. Some of them reminded me of myself in ways that made me ache a little. The ones who had families who didn't understand what they were pursuing. The ones who had been told, in various ways and with various degrees of kindness, that the path they were on wasn't for people like them. I sat with them on Tuesday evenings in a conference room at Jefferson, and I told them what I actually knew, not the polished version but the real one. About the parking garage nights, about the year I almost quit, about what it takes to keep going when the support you expected turns out to be a different thing than what you were promised. One evening, a student named Gabriella asked me what had made me finally feel like I'd made it. "Made it how?" I asked. Like it was real, like you weren't waiting for it to be taken away. I thought about it for longer than she probably expected. "There was a day," I said, "when I stopped looking over my shoulder for other people's approval. When I realized that what I'd built was mine regardless of who showed up to acknowledge it. That day was more important than any ceremony." She wrote that down. I noticed her writing it down, and something in my chest shifted in a way I recognized but couldn't name precisely. The local paper ran a story about the Meridian program in its 2nd year. The headline called it, "A New Kind of Mentorship, Jefferson Physician Builds Pipeline for First-Gen Medical Students." There was a photo of me, with 3 of the students, all of us in the conference room, laughing at something that had just been said. It was an honest photo. Nothing posed. I sent it to Priya. She sent back 3 words. "There you are." I did not send it to my family. The calls had slowed by then. My mother called on my birthday and left a voicemail that was careful and restrained in a way that told me someone had coached her or that she had thought hard about what she wanted to say. She wished me a happy birthday. She said she was proud of me, which was a word I had not heard from her in such a long time that it landed strangely, like hearing a song you used to know and realizing you'd forgotten the melody. I listened to it twice. Then I set the phone down and went back to what I was doing. A few months after that, Vanessa sent a text that was different from the others. It was long and it was specific, and it acknowledged things she had never acknowledged before. She named the graduation day. She named the note. She said she had been thinking about it for months and that she knew it wasn't okay. She said she didn't expect anything from me but that she needed to say it. I read it 3 times. I didn't respond that day, or the next, but I saved the message, which I hadn't done with any of the others. I thought about what it means to leave a door without forcing it. I thought about how forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing, how one can be given privately without requiring the other. I thought about Gabriella writing in her notebook, about Dr. Okafor saying that's how you know you mean it, about Priya's voice cutting through the auditorium applause like she had promised, about the morning I stood in the kitchen holding a 4-sentence note that tried to reduce 11 years to something small, and how I had set it down and made coffee and put on my gown anyway. There is a version of this story that ends with a confrontation, a phone call where everything gets said, a family dinner where the wounds are laid out and examined and someone makes promises and it all resolves into something that looks like before, only cleaner. I don't think I have that story. I'm not sure I want it. What I have is this: an apartment with light that comes through the south windows every morning and makes the kitchen feel honest. A job that asks everything from me and gives back more than I expected. A program full of students who are figuring out their own true north. A friend who shows up with croissants and doesn't rush me. A text message saved in my phone that I have not yet answered and may not answer for a long time or may answer tomorrow. I haven't decided. What I know is that I am not waiting anymore. Not for a call, not for an acknowledgement, not for someone to recognize what 11 years cost and what they built. The ceremony was not little. It never was. And the silence I chose afterward, the unreturned calls, the unread letters, the space I protected with the same discipline I brought to everything else that mattered, that silence was never weakness. It was precision. It was the clearest statement I had ever made about who I was and what I would no longer spend myself on. Some mornings I drive to the hospital in the early gray light and I think about the kitchen the morning of my graduation. How still it was. How wrong and how clarifying at the same time. And I think about how sometimes the thing that was supposed to break you turns out to be the thing that finally, completely sets you free. I don't know what my family does with their guilt. That's not mine to manage anymore. I know what I do with mine. I show up, I practice, I stay. And I've never once, since that morning, needed them to tell me it was enough.